All right, welcome class. Good morning. This is morning for me. I'd like to spend the next two videos talking about Robert Browning's My Last Duchess. I want to spend a considerable amount of time on this poem because this is quite possibly the most difficult reading, poetry or fiction, that you will do this semester in my class. And it's difficult because it is written in a style that is Victorian. It is a very archaic's not the right word, but it is a difficult style the way the lines are constructed. All right, you'll notice that the syntax is antiquated. It's written in a very 19th century speech pattern, a very highfalutin speech pattern. Okay, so I want to go through and also just the general narrative. This is a narrative poem. Is somewhat confusing what's going on. So hopefully after watching this video you will better understand the poem. Okay, so I'm going to read it first. My Last Duchess, for Rara, and that was the name of a duke or a prince, I believe. But double check me on that. Now, this poem is in the voice of a duke, all right? A duke. That's my last duchess painted on the wall, looking as if she were alive. I call that piece a wonder now. Fra Pandolf's hands work busily a day, and there she stands. Will it please you sit and look at her? I said Fra Pandolf by design, for never read strangers like you that pictured countenance, the depth and passion of its earnest glance. But to myself they turn, since none puts by the curtain I have drawn for you but I, and seemed as they would ask me, if they durst, how such a glance came there. So not the first are you to turn and ask thus, Sir, 'twas not her husband's presence only called that spot of joy into the Duchess's cheek? Perhaps Fra Pandolf chanced to say, her mantle laps over my lady's wrist too much. Or, paint must never hope to reproduce the faint half-flush that dies along her throat. Such stuff was courtesy, she thought, and cause enough for calling up that spot of joy. She had a heart, how shall I say, too soon made glad, too easily impressed. She liked whatever she looked on, and her looks went everywhere. Sir, 'twas all one! My favor at her breast, the dropping of the daylight in the west, the bough of cherries some officious fool broke in the orchard for her, the white mule she rode with round the terrace, all and each would draw from her alike the approving speech, or blush, at least. She thanked men good, but thanked somehow, I not know how, as if she ranked my gift of a 900 years old name with anybody's gift. Who'd stoop to blame this sort of trifling? Even had you skill in speech, which I have not, to make your will quite clear to such an one, and say, just this or that, and you disgust me, here you miss, or there exceed the mark. And if she let herself be lessoned so, nor plainly set her wits to yours, forsooth, and made excuse, even then would be some stooping, and I choose never to stoop. Oh, sir, she smiled, no doubt, whenever I passed her, but who passed without much the same smile? This grew, I gave commands, then all smiles stopped together. There she stands as if alive. Will it please you rise? We'll meet the company below then. I repeat, the Count your master's known munificence is ample warrant that no just pretence of mine for dowry will be disallowed, though his fair daughter's self, as I avowed, at starting is my object. Nay, we'll go together down, sir. Notice Neptune, though, taming a seahorse, thought a rarity, which Claus of Innsbruck, cast in bronze, for me. All right, now you may be asking yourself, what in the hell is going on in this poem? Well, let's talk about it. All right, so like I said, this is a narrative poem, and in narrative poetry, a story is being told. All right, so let's identify the main characters in this story, even though it's a poem. The speaker, as we said, is the Duke. We know this because he's talking about a painting of his Last Duchess, which we can interpret through context clues as his wife who is no longer alive. Okay? The painting is painted by Frau Pandolf, the artist. So we got two of the three characters there, or two of the four characters rather in the narrative poem. Now the question becomes, who is the Duke speaking to? Well, it's only mentioned once, but it seems to be not the Count, but an assistant or a secretary or a minister to the Count. Okay? And then we also have the Count here who was waiting down below. Now, where is this poem taking place? Well, it's taking place in a private study or the Duke's bedroom or the library. I'm not entirely sure, but the painting is behind a curtain. Okay? And what is the occasion here? Why is the Count waiting downstairs? Well, as I said before, the Duchess is dead. The Duke is looking for a new wife. Okay? The Count seems to be the father of this prospective new bride, and the Count has come to meet his future son-in-law. But before the Duke will go down to meet the Count, he wants to clear up some things with the assistant. And he wants to make sure that the Count is going to pay him a dowry. Now, if you don't know what that means, a dowry is kind of an antiquated thing. The father of the bride would pay the groom money to, in essence, kind of take his daughter or to start the family off. It's kind of a strange concept to us now in the 21st century, but we pay dowry in other ways, if you think about it, the way the father of the bride or the family of the bride pays for certain things at the wedding, kind of the same thing. Okay, so that's the stage. Now, the interesting question becomes in this poem is, we know the Duchess is dead, but why or how is she dead? This is a poem that is a murder mystery. It's quite possibly one of the first true crime narratives. There were true crime narratives before, but it's written from the perspective of somebody not quite there. The Duke gives the impression he's a psychopath, a killer, and we'll talk about that. Let's break it down. That's my Last Duchess painted on the wall, looking as if she were alive. Of course she's not. But why is she looking as if she's alive? Well, Frau Pandolf painted her well. But what's interesting, though, the Duke only will draw the curtain occasionally, keeps her hidden. All right? So we get this idea that the Duke treats women like objects. He treats other people like objects. He will only show, even in death, he will only permit his ex-wife, his deceased wife, to be looked at by his permission. All right? We can see the jealousy bubble forth in this poem. Sir, 'twas not her husband's presence only called that spot of joy into the Duchess's cheek. So they're looking at what Frau Pandolf has painted. Frau Pandolf has painted the Duke's wife as very lovely, with rosy cheeks. And the Duke says, it wasn't just me that brought her joy into those cheeks, which means perhaps she had a suitor, she had another male, perhaps she was having an affair with another person. All right? So we can understand how this could drive this Duke crazy. I mean, this is a misogynistic Duke. This is a killer Duke. Such stuff was courtesy, she thought, and cause enough for calling up that spot of joy. She had a heart, how shall I say, too soon made glad, too easily impressed. So you can tell the Duke is was kind of pissed off that his wife was so kind. You know, even if she didn't have an affair, the way that she looked at other men because she's just a nice person angered the Duke mightily. She looked on, and her looks went everywhere. Okay, she had a wandering eye, according to the Duke. And then he gives examples. The bough of cherries some officious fool broke in the orchard for her. All right, the white mule she rode with round the terrace. So he's noticed that she has been talking to other men. Right? I mean, come on now. It's not like she's having an affair. We don't know that for sure, but he thinks in his kind of deranged, jealous, sadistic mind that she's having an affair. Or blush at least. She thanked men. Good. Now, this is interesting because this represents his hierarchical thinking. He obviously thinks women are below men. He thinks that women are unequal to men, which, you know, this was written in the 19th century, but it's taking place in the 16th century or 15th century. I'm not entirely sure. When those hierarchical structures were way more ingrained. Not that they're not today, but way more ingrained. She thanked men good, so he says at least she thanked men. She should show subservience to men, but thanked somehow I not know how, as if she ranked my gift of a 900 years old name with anybody's gift. He's saying she's showing other men generosity when she should be showing me the most generosity because I gave her royalty. I gave her a last name that has stood at least for 900 years. It's a royal and respected last name. Who'd stoop to blame this sort of trifling, right? What he's saying here is, can you blame me? Can you blame me for being pissed off and jealous? Even had you skill in speech, which I have not. Now, this is interesting because he seems self-deprecating at times. Much like serial killers that you see on television will be, they tend to be, or they're portrayed as intelligent people who can be quite charming. What's funny about this is he clearly does have the skill to speak. He's been speaking eloquently this entire time. So he's being a little bit too deprecating. He is not showing his true self. It's not just his ex-wife who is hidden behind the curtains. It's also the Duke for a lot of reasons. Okay. Quite clear to such an one and say, just this or that, and you disgust me. Here you miss or there exceed the mark. And if she let herself be lessoned so, nor plainly set her wits to yours, forsooth it made excuse. Even then would be some stooping, and I choose never to scoop. So even if she made excuses, even if she gave him a ton of reasons to stoop, he's portraying himself as too noble to really stoop. You know, she's the one that's guilty. He hasn't done anything wrong. That's what he's saying. Oh, sir, she smiled, no doubt, so she keeps smiling. Whenever I passed her, so he's getting more and more paranoid, thinking that she's having an affair. But who passed without much the same smile? So the smile is just not reserved for the Duke. He's noticing that she smiles at other people. And this really angers him. Remember, he's really possessive. He wants this woman just for himself. And this is perhaps the most chilling couplet. This grew, so her smiles grew. I gave commands, then the smiles stopped together. Now, what does that mean? I gave commands, then all the smiles stopped together. Now, on one hand, what that means is he commanded her to stop smiling, and so she did. Or I gave commands to kill her, and she was killed. And then, of course, all the smiles stopped because she's no longer living and breathing. It's a very chilling, haunting line that just gives me, kind of chills, right? This is written so well that I can see this killer's mindset. Okay. There she stands as if alive. Will it please you rise? Right. So they're still looking at the painting. Then he gets the count's assistant to rise. We'll meet the company below then. All right. So I'm going to stop there because I'm running out of time, but then we'll pick that up right here and then we'll talk about form.